This, I hope, will prompt a conversation for us to get in sync with the federal government. That's what we've been asking to do ever since I talked to Mark Carney's predecessor, and it was, I mentioned this in our first conversation, and it may be as you go forward that there's a tolerance to increase it, but I can tell you I think that the business community has reached its limit. And why does it matter? We're competing for capital with the United States. Those dollars can flow anywhere. And if we get too far ahead of where the Americans are, then all of those billions of dollars of investment will not come here.
A clear message today from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith on industrial carbon pricing. Now, back in 2022, her province agreed to meet the federal industrial carbon pricing schedule, which would have seen the price hit $170 per ton by the year 2030. But today, Smith and her government announced an indefinite freeze at the current rate of $95 a ton. We reached out to the federal government for a response, but have not heard back just yet. So why is Alberta backing off that agreement? Well, Rebecca Schulz is Alberta's Environment Minister, and she joins us right now. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So as I just mentioned, 3 years ago, your government had that deal to meet the federal equivalency requirements for industrial emitters. Why are you deciding to walk away from that agreement today?
Well, here's what I'll say. We're very much in a different time than we were a few years ago. At that time, the Liberal government, propped up by the NDP, had a mandate for, I would say, a pretty activist environmental agenda. We also were not facing the threats that we see right now from south of our borders with our major trading partners. And so if we want to keep our industry competitive, and that's what the new Prime Minister ran on in this last election campaign, is supporting the Canadian economy and protecting us from risks of threats with tariffs, keeping us competitive and expanding our trade and export partnerships, then they will see that a carbon tax increasing to 170 will absolutely decimate our industry. It's not something that can continue, and that's why we've came out today and said that we're going to indefinitely freeze that price.
You had said what Mark Carney had campaigned on as, and now that he is Prime Minister, he also talked about making sure that there was a strong industrial side to the carbon tax. He's not moving away from that. So why do you think this fits in line with where he's going and what he campaigned on? Because you're moving back from that.
We're actually holding our industrial carbon levy at $95 a ton. What we're saying is that at a time like now, where there's so much uncertainty facing our major industries and so many other nations looking to us for our safe, affordable, reliable, responsibly produced energy, that we cannot put these additional punitive taxes on our industry at a time like this if we want to continue to lead the way, to support a strong Canadian economy, to build partnerships when it comes to energy, and also to do the right thing for the environment. We are 1.5% of global emissions. And it was just a couple of years ago that we were paying 34% of the industrial carbon tax. Canadians, and certainly we've heard this over the last couple of years, are asking why at the cost of affordability, energy security, which is an issue of national security. Certainly we've heard talked about over the last number of months, and really the benefits that our energy industry provides to the Canadian economy overall. We can't risk all that at a time like this.
So you talked about the instability, but back in 2022, then Minister Sonia Savage said maintaining this system made sense because the businesses had already booked the higher costs on their balance sheets. So what do you think has changed if back then your same government had said that it made sense to maintain this type of pricing schedule?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it was a different time. I think, what you saw the Liberal and NDP government doing just a couple of years ago is markedly different than what they were campaigning on right now. I don't think Canadians at a time like this are willing to risk our energy security, our overall Canadian economy, jobs, and energy affordability for everyday Canadians across the country. I don't think that that's what Canadians want to see right now. And I think that's why you saw such a marked difference in the Liberal campaign and such a focus on national unity, energy security, and a strong Canadian economy. What industry is saying is that with all of the uncertainty, this is just one additional piece that makes us completely uncompetitive, especially when compared to our neighbors south of the border.
At the same time, you are maintaining this industrial cost. So I wanted to ask you specifically on that. The Canadian Climate Institute found that industrial carbon pricing systems will be responsible for between 20 and 48% of Canada's emissions reductions by 2030. Given how significant that is, how will you make up that type of reduction in emissions in Alberta specifically?
You know, it's not surprising to me that you can find activist NGOs that support the path of the former minister, Stephen Guilbeault, when it came to environment. However, times have changed, and Canadians absolutely value energy affordability, jobs, a strong Canadian economy, and the ability to defend our economy against threats that we're seeing south of the border. We have been out there talking with industry over the last number of months as our tier review and our tier system has equivalency with the federal system right now. We've been talking to industry about what changes need to be made, and one message was loud and clear. A $170 carbon tax will absolutely decimate our industries. We remain competitive now, although we are, I would say industry is happy with the work that Alberta has done. They want to see Alberta continue to operate in the space and not have the federal government who quite frankly doesn't or hasn't seemed to understand energy development and production to oversee that type of programming. And so, that was what went into our decision today, is that we are seeing emissions reduction. We are seeing emissions intensity go down while our energy production goes up. That is why places like Japan, I was just there in February, they said, look, we know Alberta and British Columbia have the natural gas we need as an energy consumer. We see your energy as part of our very ambitious emissions reduction goals. What we can't understand is Canada. Where is Canada? Why would they be proposing production cuts and increased taxes on an industry that has the ability to do so much, not only for Japan, but Southeast Asia? And so certainly I know that's a message our premier has heard. I know other premiers have heard that. And that's, what we had as a major topic of conversation during this last federal election campaign.
But Minister, as part of your system in Alberta, there is a credit system in this that a number of industries pay into. There have been studies that show that removing or weakening this large emitter trading system that you have will devalue the $5 billion worth of credits that companies are holding right now. What do you tell those companies who are going to see those credits lose value now?
The value of credits has fluctuated over the last number of years for a variety of different factors. But the fact of the matter is that carbon credit market remains. Again, though,
it remains, but as a result of your government's action, it will be devalued. So if you are concerned about investments by industry, what are you going to tell those industries that have that $5 billion worth of credits now? They're going to see them devalued. If you are saying the goal of this is to make sure you're taking care of industry and maintain their competitiveness, that's $5 billion worth of credits that is not going to be worth that money anymore.
Again, here's what we would say. We've seen a fluctuation in the carbon credit market for a variety of reasons over the last number of years. Companies had options in terms of how to meet their obligations under our tier system, and that would be to either use credits or to pay their obligations. As we've seen that carbon price increasing to 170, of course, more companies would be looking to use carbon credits as opposed to paying out their obligations. But ultimately, in our discussions with industry, it was unequivocally clear that $170 carbon price would absolutely decimate our major industries, our economy, and of course then impact our ability to provide safe, affordable, reliable, environmentally responsible produced energy to Alberta, to Canada, and to the rest of the world. That's not something that we're interested in right now, and I don't think that's something Canadians want to see.
Minister, just one last question, because I want to make sure that I understand it. You say that there are fluctuations in those credits. This is one that is being caused by you. This is not an external factor. Do you take responsibility for devaluing those carbon credits, that $5 billion worth?
Here's what I would say. We've been talking to industry over the last number of months, gathering their feedback on tier, because we recognize that there is so much uncertainty with federal policy and policy south of the border, creating stress and investment uncertainty on our major industries. We didn't want to have that. So we've been very transparent and open with industry, gathering their feedback unequivocally. I would say we heard that $170 carbon price would absolutely decimate industry. It is not something that we can continue to work towards. Holding it right now keeps us in line with the federal backstop. But you know what? Even the Canada Growth Fund, in striking agreements with Alberta companies, landed on a carbon price of $86.50. And so I think even folks within the federal government knew that 170 would be a very, very bad idea. This keeps us in that ballpark, keeps us aligned with the federal pricing system, at least in the near term, so that we can have this conversation with the federal government and see if they meant what they said about putting the Canadian economy first.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Alberta's Environment Minister, Rebecca Schulz, thanks so much for being with us here on Power Play.
My pleasure.